Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for the October 1st Friday webinar. We're very excited to have Kate Gannon-Cullinan from Washington State University joining us today. Her session is titled Giving and Receiving Feedback. Before I turn it over to Kate, just have a few reminders for you. If you have any questions, we're going to have a question and answer time at the end. And there's her session is titled Giving and Receiving Feedback. There is a question and answer at the bottom right of the screen if you're on YouTube. And you can go ahead and type it in there, and I will be collecting those questions to ask at the end. And then don't forget that we'll also be posting the link for the feedback down there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Kate, and she can go ahead and take it away.
Good morning, Northwest NWACUHO and any other folks joining us from afar. Pardon my scratchy throat as I clear my throat more times than I would care to this morning, but it is that time here in Pullman, Washington, where everyone is grossly sick with sore throats. So a quick couple notes before we get going into this. So this is a presentation that I did for our entire department for student staff members regarding how we hold them accountable in their position. So the cycles of supervision is what we call it, when maybe they make not a great decision and we have to have some job action like a verbal or written warning, things like that. So this is adapted from that and also going over a couple pieces in here that I kept the same so that you kind of understand some context for what we do here at Washington State. And if you want to know more about those processes, I'm happy to answer questions or chat with you offline later too. But the theme that I chose for them was Secret Life of Pets. So I decided to keep that because, hey, it's Friday and it's October, and let's have some cute dogs and animated animals on the screen. So, so there's a couple little video clips in here that we're going to play as well, but I promise they have relevance. So, so anyways, as Andrew said, my name is Kate. I'm one of the assistant directors here at Washington State, and this year I have taken over our evaluation process from another colleague as they went on to pursue a different job opportunity. And so with that process, wanted to make sure that I was educating our students and staff and really our professional staff on how to give and receive feedback. And I think this can be applicable information for all levels, right? So whether you're an RA or a director, I think it's helpful to refresh on how to best give and also how to receive and really hear feedback that you're being given. And so really my goals for today is that we're gonna learn some effective strategies to utilize constructive feedback that you're receiving from supervisors and peers, some ways to successfully give that back to other folks, maybe a few different styles or some considerations on how to respond well. And then also what opportunities that you have and can provide with your own institutions to give feedback and voice concerns. I think sometimes we forget about some of the formalized ways and informal ways that we can do this because it should be kind of continuous. Oh, went the wrong way, just kidding. There we go. Okay, so usually at this point I ask for audiences to shout out stuff, but given our format this morning, I'll just let you know some of the common responses I hear shouted out for feedback as code for criticism, evaluation, tips for improvement. You did this wrong. Maybe people think it's scary or intimidating or that it's going to hurt their feelings. And when we're receiving constructive feedback, you feel, and most folks will shout out, hurt or demoralized, condescending. But hopefully by the end of this, we'll kind of get you to maybe more feel, ready for a challenge or ready to listen or seeking improvement, wanting to better yourself. And so I start with this question of what is your goal? So when you're considering giving feedback to other folks, what is the goal in that? And I'll touch on this throughout this because I think it's really important. Is your goal really to change behavior, right? Is it to correct something? Someone is doing a process wrong, and so you need to give them feedback so that they are no longer making that mistake. Is it to help someone develop, right? So a lot of times with my entry-level professionals, when I'm coaching them and giving them feedback, it's because I want them to develop as a professional in our field. I want to help them improve upon their skills in these areas. Not necessarily that they've done something wrong, but how can I help give them feedback that will allow them to mature their scope in their role? Or is it to be right, right? I have competition in my top 10. So sometimes I want to give feedback just to prove that, hey, I'm doing this the right way and you're not, even though they're both acceptable routes to the finalization that you want. So is it to prove your rightness, or is it to be mean, or maybe to, to kind of maybe demoralize somebody, or just to, to really not come at it with a kindness or a sense to want to improve. And of course, that is what the goal for feedback should be. It's to help somebody improve, to help correct behavior. It should not be to demean someone or to assert your dominance in a situation. That's not what feedback is for in this context, and hopefully ever. But in our fields, right, we want to be developing folks. So I'm going to play this quick 1-minute video, I think. Hooray.
Feedback is the breakfast of champions. The 2 words of inspiration for today are constructive feedback. I like to stay away from the word criticism. Feedback is the return of information about the result of a process or activity, an evaluative response. Feedback can be constructive or destructive depending on the delivery. Here are 5 tips to remember the next time you're in a position to provide feedback. Number 1, be direct, not to be confused with rude. Number 2, express concern. Concern communicates a sense of importance. Number 3, express appreciation. It gives your words extra potency. Number 4, make sure it is not personal, hostile, picky, or demeaning. And number 5, make sure it is caring, clear, and focused on improvement. And if you want to add the become better cherry on top, thank them for listening. Thank you for listening and tuning in. Make today amazing. I'll see you soon.
So lovely little 1 quick minute video. I like that because I think it's really easy for our staff to kind of understand. I'll come back for sure to the direct does not equal rude or careless in a little bit. That's kind of a piece that is very near and dear to my soul. But when we talk about constructive feedback, I think we've shifted the language from what we used to consider some years ago. Constructive criticism is really what we should be giving folks. Right? Because we're trying to build somebody up with our criticism. Sorry, I forgot to put my phone all the way down. But really, we're switching to feedback because it should be a dyadic conversation, right? And so that's really what we're talking about when we're saying feedback. It's I'm giving you information and you're giving me some back information, and we're having this dialogue and this response. And so And we want to clarify it with being constructive, because what that is implying is that you're intending to help build someone up through this feedback and not to tear them down. And we often associate the word criticism with it being negative. And constructive feedback can also and should also be positive. And I'll talk about that a little bit later too. As someone who supervises staff members, it shouldn't always be you're only giving feedback when there's something to correct, but also reinforcing positive behaviors or well-performed tasks and responsibilities. That way you're setting up this culture that is really, I value feedback because I know that you're not only talking to me when I'm doing things wrong, but you're also reinforcing or showing appreciation, like the video said, when I'm doing things correctly and doing them well. And I think we oftentimes only want to correct what is wrong. And so that's why we have this scary or trepidatious approach when we're talking about feedback and giving that and receiving that, right? If I'm saying, I'm going to be giving you some feedback this week at our one-on-one conversation. Now that initially, right, your initial reaction is, oh no, I did something wrong. What did I do wrong? And now you're going to be stressing about it all week until we meet. And so if you're creating as a supervisor that culture of giving positive feedback, as well as maybe some more like, here's some constructive stuff you need to work on, you can hopefully help change that relationship that you have with your supervisee. I think it's important to recognize that we are constantly giving and receiving formal and informal feedback all year long, right? We know the importance of nonverbals, our verbals, the actions that we perform, whether we're on time with things or not. That's all feedback and data that we are taking in as peers, as supervisors, as supervisees. And it can be tough to have conversations because we care so much about our work. It's personal work for many of us, right? We're putting our whole selves into this. It's so much human connection in our field in residence life and housing. And so to believe that there's no personal attachment to your work and no investment in what you're doing, I think is naive. And so, so it can be hard to get, to get some feedback that's maybe here's where you need to improve because you're putting all of this work into it. And so what I want you to do as we start getting into giving and receiving is when we initially, our claws go out, when folks say we want to give you feedback, is not that they don't appreciate the work that you are doing. They just we really want, when we're giving feedback, to help develop that skill a little bit more, maybe help fine tune it, or help you think through situational communication, right? So maybe you didn't do something wrong, but how you're having this conversation with your RA, and that RA, how they heard it was more negative than you intended, right? We'll talk a little bit about impact and intent, as those so often do not go hand in hand with communication, right? Because so many things are open for interpretation. But just to kind of think, right? Feedback doesn't just happen when you're doing evaluations formally, but it's happening informally in your weekly conversations, when you're giving folks tasks or directives, when you're sending back that incident report that makes no sense or is missing some really key pieces of information. That is all ongoing feedback that is happening all year long, and even past training. Okay, so we're going to start with giving feedback because I think that comes more naturally to us as humans, is to be able to help correct others or to help improve our peers. So I talked a second about check your motives at the beginning, that whole what is your goal, but I wanna bring it back, right? So is it to help or correct a behavior, or is it to tear down or judge somebody? When you are going into this conversation, why is this a part of your agenda for that meeting, right? Is it, okay, you were late to this this meeting, and so I need to give you some feedback and remind you that you need to be on time because I'm your boss and that's what I need to do? Or is it I need to tell you something that you already know, you've already apologized for being late and told me it wasn't going to happen again, but I need to bring it back up again? Now, I understand there's some institutional culture that might require that conversation to happen anyways, but really check the motives. Is it I need to remind you that you were late, or how can I help you be more on time? Would it help for me to give you a text in the morning? Would it be helpful to cut out something the night before so that you're able to get up early that next day, right? What ways can you help be a part of this feedback solution? Be descriptive and not evaluative. We talk often about this when we're teaching RAs to write those incident reports, right? Describe the behavior, not the individual, right? So the other day when you were discussing this with your staff, I noticed that the tone shifted and it seemed that your staff was not as receptive to things. And I think maybe you were focusing a lot on this one piece and not taking into account the entire situation, as opposed to you were really rude when you were talking to your staff the other day. And so how can you be more descriptive about exactly what you're giving feedback for, as opposed to these evaluative or judgmental statements that may seem more based in your own perception and not in the actual reality of the event? Right? We do that with roommates too. Use users I statements, not you statements, because you're trying to talk about how it impacted you. Also a great way to be descriptive and not evaluative of the other person. That advice still rings true through feedback. Time, place, and manner, right? There's a little saying about you criticize in private and praise in public, right? And though I think that is 100% true, and I think we all try to abide by that, right? If I have some feedback from one of my hall directors, I'm not going to do that in a staff meeting. That's not going to be the first time they're going to hear that feedback from me. However, there may be some times and places where addressing it in a group makes the most sense, right? Someone says something in your staff meeting that is maybe a bit insensitive. And so if you don't say something that does more damage and not addressing that behavior as inappropriate than it would do to kind of address that and come together as a staff, right? We have one of our behind closed doors with our assistant hall directors is relating to that. So someone says something real offhand in your staff meeting, and addressing that right there, that might be the most appropriate time, place, and manner. Oftentimes when it's an individual piece of someone doing something wrong, the best time to address that is individually with them so that they can really hear it and have that grace to improve rather than kind of tearing someone down in front of their peer group. Okay, so assuming the best, and this you'll see this in receiving feedback as well. We want to assume the best of our folks. We want to assume that if they made a mistake, it wasn't done maliciously. It wasn't that they don't care about their job or the students that they're serving or the staff that they're developing and supervising. It's that they might have felt in that moment this was the route that they needed to go with the information that they had. Right. And so I always try to start my conversations when I'm addressing maybe a mistake or something I'm not understanding is, can you tell me a little bit about why that was the decision you made? I want to understand the context of where you're coming from. I'm sure that I'm missing a few pieces because I know you wouldn't just leave an incident in the middle of it happening, right? I know you wouldn't say this directly to an RA. And so can you tell me your side of things? So that I can understand what your intent was in this conversation, and then we can kind of unravel the impact that it had on a staff member. Considering communication styles and needs, as well as your own. And so I like to, in this piece, kind of infuse a little bit of StrengthsFinder assessment as well. And so considering how they like to receive information, how they like to communicate it, and how you communicate as well. I have communication in my top 5, so I tend to be a fairly direct communicator, but sometimes I need to understand that that's not what someone else needs from me. I might need to soften that a little bit, depending on what the content is that I'm giving them to. If it's maybe a more direct, not great decision that they made, I might need to be direct, but then quickly work to repair that ego damage and kind of help work with them through some future steps. One of my examples is I have positivity as a top 5. That's really helpful, and it helps me in my conversations with folks. But I also have to be careful when I use that in giving feedback, because it so much focuses on the silver lining often that it can get lost in the actual data of what I need to provide. And so that's my cautionary tale of the compliment sandwich, right? We've heard that. So you say something nice, then you give your maybe not so positive feedback, or not so, not a praise, but a criticism. And then you follow it up with another thing, right? So I really enjoy the energy you bring to staff meetings. What you need to work on is being on time to staff meetings and not talking during them. However, just the way that you're connecting with staff is so great, right? And that's a great way to deliver things, but be cautious, because too much fluffy bread on either side, or Oreo cookie, whatever sandwich you want to make, can make that middle part non-existent, right? So if you're giving me all this praise at the beginning, and then you throw in this quick little criticism piece, and then you give me all this fluff at the end, I might completely miss that you're trying to actually change or improve my behavior in something. And so I have to, with my own communication style and having positivity as a top 5 strength, I have to be really knowledgeable and understanding about when I'm providing this feedback to my staff members, am I being direct enough to where they're hearing that I need you to make this change? It's not a suggestion, or I'm not advising you here. I'm kind of putting on my supervisor hat and saying, in the future, I really need you to respond to these incidents in this way. Cool. I know you can do this because I've seen you do this successfully elsewhere, right? It might be kind of a take on maybe an open-faced compliment sandwich, right? And so that's that whole thinking about the future and offering help, right? I know that you can be on time to these meetings because I know that you care and you want to be there and you want to get that information. How can I be a part of that solution to help you move forward as your supervisor? Excuse me. So into the receiving feedback piece, which I think is much harder than giving it, because now it's impacting me, right? We tend to be a fairly egocentric type culture. And so I want to re-echo the whole direct piece. So in the short little video, it says direct is not to be confused with rude, right? The direct does not mean that you get to be a jerk and you get to be uncaring about who you are providing feedback for or how you're receiving it. So I make the caveat of direct, is this really the best for you? And I'm going to skip down to that last bullet point about how you prefer to deliver feedback might not be how you prefer to receive it. A lot of folks say, I want direct feedback and clear, just give it to me straight, right? And then you do that, and then they're like, ouch, that hurt my feelings, right? Or that was tough to hear. Kudos to you if you are able to do that and not take it personally. I think that's a developed skill that a lot of folks struggle with, because we put so much of our time and energy, and sometimes overly direct feedback can seem unappreciative of what you're actually doing, right? When my partner says, oh, what's for dessert? I'm like, what about the lovely dinner I made, right? Or something like that. So it's like you're skipping past the appreciation stage and just going into what you find wrong. And so I think sometimes we can tend to kind of spiral out of control on that a little bit. And so I just want you to, as you're thinking about how you like to receive feedback, is that really how you prefer to deliver it? Because it's not often the same for folks. Really reflect on the feedback that's being provided, right? How can you incorporate that? How can you use that? Because you're assuming the best, that this person has the best for you in mind, right? They're giving you this feedback. I can see this must be hard for you to give me this feedback, right? Because I've had to give feedback, and it can be tricky conversations, and you don't know how folks are going to react. But really kind of reflecting on what they're saying. Keep an open mind and open ears, right? So really trying to listen for ways that you can incorporate that into your practice and incorporate that into how you do your job and how you're approaching the next scenario, versus finding arguments inside yourself, right? And immediately being on the defense. So I need you to lower your energy, Kate, in the next conversation. And instead of me thinking through, okay, my energy must be a lot for some folks, right? My woo can probably be a little much. So maybe I do need to subdue that a little bit. And instead, maybe I start automatically being on the defensive, right? I'm automatically, why can't I be me? Whatever, like my energy is great. Someone needs to bring energy, right? And so trying to get out of that practice of spiraling and getting defensive about who you are and what you're doing is, how is that person receiving me in this space? Clearly they've thought about it enough and reflected on enough that they wanted to provide me this feedback. And so how can I really incorporate that and keep an open mind? If you need clarification, ask questions, right? Sometimes specific examples just don't really fit what you're hearing, or they're not being as descriptive, and they're being more evaluative, right? So you're one of our hall directors really struggles understanding the word extra and what it means to be extra. And so specific examples, I'm like, oh, you're just being extra. And they're like, but I need more information. What does that mean when my students say I'm being extra? Because sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's not, right? And just continuing to give more and more specific examples, or more and more clarification. There might be some language barriers there as well, as to what someone is hearing, right? What energy means to me in my context is positive, but what it might mean for somebody else is that it's draining for them. And so really making sure that we're trying to make sure we're on the same page, right? The whole how you prefer to deliver it versus how you prefer to receive it piece I touched on, but just another little piece of strengths infusion is to kind of think about that a little bit, right? What are your strengths or your personality styles? Like I said, I have woo, and so a big part of that for me is winning others over. One large chunk of my position and my responsibilities is planning our staff training. So for students, for our assistant hall directors, and for our professional staff, I plan their training all summer long. And so I also get all of those lovely evaluations at the end of each training session. Those are pretty direct because they are written, right? No one's going to beat around the bush and give me a compliment sandwich when they're giving me feedback on behind closed doors and RA training, right? And so for me receiving that, I know I want clear data because the assessment person in me needs that data to be clear so that I don't have to try to sort through the weeds. But as a woo, I'm like, ouch, I want you to like everything I'm doing. And so it feels like personal attacks. And so I really have to put myself in the mindset, which is why I don't look at feedback from training until well into the fall semester. Because if I'm too personally invested in it at the time and I'm reading that, I know for my own self that I am too close to it. I put too much of my time and just energy all summer into it to hear that feedback, not as a Kate, you're the worst kind of feedback, knowing and that's not it, right? I don't control every aspect of training. I'm not at every in-hall with them. But it's hard to not take that personally when you're so invested in something. So if you're in charge of a program and you're getting assessment on that, my advice is to let it sit for a little bit, do your own reflection, right? Give yourself some feedback on things, and then go back to that evaluation data, because sometimes we're just too close to it, and I think it's hard to really receive the feedback in a good way. Okay, so moving forward, a little bit of give and take, right? So in the moment, and this is when you need to give feedback and when you need to take some time. And so in the moment, I just caution folks to be careful of going into a feedback conversation too emotionally charged, right? So you just come out of a staff meeting and you're really peeved up because somebody said something. Maybe that's not the time for you to go and have that conversation with them. Maybe you need to sit on it and reflect on it. And this is a practice that I've done in the last couple of years. You know, I am a passionate individual in my field, so I feel very strong about lots of things. And so if something happens in a staff meeting and I'm revved up, let me write it out to myself, right? This is why I'm upset. I'm gonna chew on it a little bit, sleep on it. If in a day I'm still really frustrated by it, and I feel it's nagging at me, I really need to address it. Then I will have that conversation directly with that person if I'm able to. If I'm still unsure as to whether or not this is just a me thing and I'm just having some type of feels about it and it's really not a big deal, it's just how it's impacting me and it's impacted no one else, then maybe I'll chat with my supervisor about, hey, this happened. Should I say something or should I not? Am I just over dramatizing this, or am I reacting in a way that's really not appropriate for the situation because I was in a bad mood that day? Is there some other unresolved issue with me and this person that is making everything they do just really get on my nerves, right? We all have had that happen to us in staff. And we have RAs that's happening with as they're probably moving into some storming phases. And so if they're like, I think you should talk to this person and maybe clarify, because clearly it's still with you for a few days. Or if it's, I think you just have some issues with this person, maybe your conversation isn't about that staff meeting, it's about something else later. And so really kind of understanding when is that appropriate time. And it often is not right in the moment, unless you need to interrupt behavior right away because it is being detrimental to your group, of saying, you know what, and really that's more of a sidestep, right? You know what, I think maybe we can address that later. I'd like us to get back on track to what we were talking about, right? A kind of easy way to redirect the conversation, as opposed to a let's all attack this person right now kind of a piece while we're all emotionally charged. There are scheduled times and meetings. I'm sure most of us have one-on-one meetings, or if not, we can set up meetings with different folks. And this right column here is kind of what our process looks like at WSU for our formal evaluations. So we are a semester school, one of the few left. And so we are closing up week 7 today in our semester already. And so next week is our mid-year, when we'll start doing our mid-semester spot check. So we do, a really short kind of mid-semester spot check in the fall for our staff. We do one again in the spring for folks that we hire brand new. And so that's kind of to look at a couple of their different community expectation things. Have you done the number of programs you should have done at this point? Intentional interactions. We have them do name quizzes and sociograms and things like that to kind of help give us some more quantitative, tangible measuring of their responsibility and expectations as community developers, as that is the core part of their job. And so we do that spot check there to kind of give them some feedback and then also give them time to use and implement that for the rest of the semester. And then at the close of the semester around December, we'll do our mid-year evaluation. And this one for our process is a pretty much 360 type evaluation where you composite things. So they'll do an evaluation of themselves, they'll do one of their peers, and then their RED will do one. And then we'll also get some of our EBI data, which is the Educational Benchmarking Institute, where we do evaluations from our students about a number of different measures and factors, from dining to safety to maintenance, and to programming and community building and staff and all that stuff. And so we use all of those pieces to make a composite evaluation. Then our hall directors have that conversation and review all that data in January when they come back to start spring semester, so they can implement all of that information for their second semester. And then if they're exiting the position altogether and not returning with us, so they're graduating, they're moving off campus, this just isn't for them. If they're exiting the position on their own accord, then we do an exit evaluation as well. We also formally do an EBI of just the RAs on our department. And so that's where we get some more generalized feedback on, trainings, committee work, how they feel supported by the department. And so it's kind of above their RED and more department level type data, and we do that one in the spring later. And so a lot of we really try to create a culture of assessment and using that data. And I know I did a presentation earlier in the summer about using staff training data to make improvements. And so that can apply across this platform as well if you're interested. I believe that one's on YouTube already too. Okay, so this is one other little video I wanted us to watch, and then we'll chat about this. I think this is also about a minute.
Ready to take control of your back pain?
There we go. No
Katie
commercials.
brought home a new dog from the pound. She said he's my brother. I don't want a brother, and I don't even have a bed now. I'm sleeping on the floor like a dog. Why would Katie do this to me?
Because she's a dog person, Max, and dog people do weird, inexplicable things. Like they get dogs instead of cats.
Okay, please don't start now, Chloe. That is not helping.
Max, come on, I'm your friend. Okay, and as your friend, I gotta be honest with you, I don't care about you or your problems. But if you don't do something about this guy, and soon, your perfect little life with your dumb human is gonna be over. Forever.
Forever?
Forever, yeah, because they just... Why is this mouse on my paw still?
You know, we could watch the best of Chloe all day. If you haven't seen this movie, it's quite delightful. It's a little violent for little kids, but it is a great movie. It's on Netflix. So of course we all care. That's why we want to provide this feedback. We care either about that person developing, or we care about them doing the process right? Whatever our intention is, there is care associated with that. And a quick note too on the comment that she made, and this wasn't exactly what she means, is when she says, if you don't do something soon, right? I think it's important to recognize if we're having continuous frustration, that demands us to take some sort of action and to give a chance to that person to really improve and make that relationship better. So if we are constantly complaining about a situation or an individual or an individual's actions, but we're not willing to tell them that we're having that issue, or we're never giving them that feedback so that they can improve that relationship with us, that's not really fair to them either, right? And so if someone, you know, just doesn't care for me, and I have no idea why, right, that onus might be on me as well to be like, you know, I'm feeling some tension in this relationship. Is there something that I've done, or is something in my communication style just really not meeting your needs as a supervisor? I'm really trying to get to the bottom of that, because in the end, we all need to work together to provide great communities for our residents. And so how can you make sure that you're being forward with that information and giving folks the opportunity to improve instead of just writing them off, I think is really important. I know we have RAs that will come and vent to us, or roommates that will come and vent to us about these situations. And after a certain point that they come and tell me the same story, excuse me, 3 times, you know, my questions kind of shift into, you know, removing from giving them advice on giving feedback into, so it sounds like we've had this conversation a few times. Now, you know, I've given you some tools for giving that feedback to the person, but at this point, I just want to know, what is your end goal, you know, in this? Do you want to change the behavior? Is that why you're telling me this information? Is because you want advice on how to do this better, or how to talk to them? Is it that you want me to take action and talk to this person, or you just want to vent? And I think that's an important conversation to have with supervisors, because sometimes it is that they just want to vent, but we're such a restorative, you know, profession that we're trying to help them solve these problems. And so sometimes it might be that they just need to vent for a second, right? Like I talked about in a minute, in the moment, right? They just want to vent in the moment, and then they'll be done with it. But if they're continuously venting to you about the same situation, that can be frustrating as a supervisor. And so trying to help push them to have that feedback conversation with them, I think, is a really important growing moment for our students and entry-level staff, and really mid-level staff too. I think it doesn't get any easier to have these conversations as an assistant director with your peers or with your supervisees. There's still always, you know, a little bit of a butterfly feeling in my stomach when I'm having to have maybe more tough conversations with folks. But my advice, you know, as you move forward with giving feedback and receiving feedback, is the more you practice it, the more comfortable you will be with giving that. The more alert or aware you'll be with receiving things, and even being able to kind of give yourself some feedback. Oh, you kind of got a little snappy in that staff meeting the other day. You should make sure that you address that with that person. Apologize, maybe, for being a little curt with your communication. I know what my intent was, but I also can see how that impact would be. And so let me be proactive and kind of reach out. And I think that makes you a good person to have on a team. You're self-aware, and you're also really trying to make sure those connections are built so that you can continue doing great work together. All right, so I'm going to stop talking for a minute and see if there's any questions, or if folks have other great tips for giving and receiving feedback that they've used. Excuse me.
All right, we're going to and take I don't know why there it is. Take any not feedback, but any questions you have in the live chat area on the bottom right hand of the screen. And we'll give a couple minutes here just to see if anyone asks any questions or have any suggestions that Kate was talking about. Doesn't seem that we're getting any questions. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks again, Kate, for that great presentation, and thank you to all who joined us today. Don't forget that I'm going to put the survey and the assessment down in the live chat, so if you can please fill that out, that'd be great. And if you have anyone that you know or any topic that you'd like to see on a First Friday webinar, please go ahead and send that on my way. It's part of the evaluation as well. And then next month, our First Friday webinar will feature Chris from Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, and he'll be presenting on administrative fairness and natural justice. Thanks again for coming, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.